I drove 8 hours to my son's for his engagement dinner. He said, "Oh, we had it yesterday." So my name is Cynthia, and at 58 years old, I never imagined my son Jackson would break my heart quite like this. After raising him alone since he was 5, I drove 8 hours through pouring rain to attend his engagement dinner in Boston. I had packed his favorite dessert and a special gift for him and Amanda, his fiancée, from a wealthy family who never seemed to warm up to me. When I arrived exhausted but excited, Jackson opened the door and said those words I will never forget. "Oh, we had it yesterday, just close family." Before I continue this painful story, I would love to know where you all are watching from. Please hit the like button and subscribe to join our community of shared experiences. Have you ever driven a long way for someone who didn't appreciate your effort? Let me know in the comments as I share what happened next in this journey of heartbreak and unexpected strength. I never planned on being a single mother. Michael and I had such beautiful dreams when we got married right after college. He was so proud to serve in the military, and I was building my career as a high school English teacher in our small Pennsylvania town. But when Jackson was just 5 years old, 2 men in uniform knocked on our door, and everything changed. Michael wasn't coming home. Those early years were incredibly difficult. My teaching salary barely covered our basic needs, so I picked up a second job waiting tables on weekends and during summer breaks. My parents helped when they could, but they were getting older and living on a fixed income themselves. I still remember counting coins at the kitchen table late at night, trying to figure out how to afford new shoes for Jackson's growing feet and still keep our electricity on. Despite our financial struggles, Jackson was always my priority. I made sure he had everything he needed for school, even when it meant going without myself. There were nights I ate leftover mac and cheese from his plate after telling him I had already eaten dinner. Christmas mornings were magical for him because I put aside a small amount from each paycheck all year to make sure he had presents under our tiny tree. When Jackson showed academic promise in high school, I was determined to give him every opportunity. I sold my grandmother's antique jewelry pieces one by one to pay for his SAT prep classes and college application fees. The diamond earrings that had been my wedding present from Michael funded Jackson's first semester textbooks at Boston University. College changed Jackson in ways I hadn't anticipated. He made friends with students from wealthy families who took ski trips during winter break and spent summers in Europe. I noticed him becoming more conscious of status symbols and brand names. During his sophomore year, he stopped wearing the hand-knitted scarves I made him each Christmas. By junior year, his calls home became less frequent and his visits shorter. After graduation, Jackson landed a job at a prestigious financial firm in Boston. I was so proud of him, even as I felt him drifting further away. He talked excitedly about his colleagues, the networking events, and the important clients. When he mentioned Amanda for the first time, he emphasized that her father was a managing partner at a major investment bank. The first time I met Amanda during a weekend visit to Boston, she was polite but distant. She complimented my homemade apple pie as quaint, and seemed uncomfortable when I shared stories about Jackson's childhood. When I mentioned our small town's annual harvest festival, she exchanged a look with Jackson that made my heart sink. I tried again during their Thanksgiving visit, making all of Jackson's favorite foods, and asking interested questions about her family and work. But Amanda spent most of the visit on her phone, and I overheard her telling Jackson the guest room mattress was practically medieval. Jackson's calls became even less frequent after he and Amanda became serious. Sometimes weeks would pass without a word from him. I still sent care packages and birthday cards. I still maintained his credit card payments, a habit from his college years that somehow never stopped, even though he now earned a good salary. I told myself it was just my way of helping him establish himself in an expensive city. When Jackson called to announce his engagement to Amanda, I was genuinely happy for him. He sounded excited as he told me about the proposal at an exclusive restaurant in Boston. I immediately offered to help with wedding plans, but he quickly said Amanda's mother had it under control. When he mentioned an engagement dinner with both families, I marked the date on my calendar that very second. I spent weeks preparing for that dinner. I bought a new dress, my first splurge on myself in years. I practiced making Jackson's favorite triple chocolate cheesecake, until it was perfect. I withdrew money from my modest retirement fund to buy them a meaningful engagement gift, a beautiful set of crystal champagne flutes similar to the ones Michael and I had received from his parents. I even wrote them a heartfelt letter about the journey of marriage drawing from the brief but beautiful years I had with Michael. Despite Jackson's success, I was still helping him financially more than he knew. His premium credit card, the one he used to impress Amanda and her friends, was still linked to my accounts. The monthly payments sometimes strained my budget, especially since I had recently retired from full-time teaching, but I told myself it was temporary. Soon he would be married and fully independent. I never mentioned these payments to him, not wanting to embarrass him in front of his sophisticated fiancée. The engagement dinner was my chance to finally connect with Amanda and her family. I imagined us sharing stories, blending our families, and celebrating the love our children had found. I never imagined it would become one of the most painful experiences of my life since losing Michael. The day before my drive to Boston, I took my car to Frank at the local garage for a quick checkup. "Big trip tomorrow, Cynthia?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. I nodded excitedly, telling him about Jackson's engagement dinner. Frank had known Jackson since he was a boy, had even taught him how to change a tire when he got his first car. A used Honda I had saved 3 years to afford. "Tell that boy of yours I said congratulations," Frank said with a smile. "And drive safe, weather looks rough tomorrow." Frank wasn't wrong. I woke up at 4 in the morning to dark skies and the sound of rain hammering against my bedroom window. For a moment I considered postponing the trip, but the engagement dinner was that evening. I had already booked a motel for the night, so I wouldn't have to drive back after the celebration. Nothing was going to keep me from being there for my son's special day. I packed the car carefully, placing the cake container on the flat passenger seat and the wrapped crystal flutes in a padded box on the floor. My overnight bag and the new dress in its protective cover went in the back seat. I took one last look at my small house before pulling out of the driveway at 5 a.m., rain still coming down in sheets. The first few hours of the drive were tense. Visibility was poor, and twice I had to pull over when the rain became too heavy to see through. I tried calling Jackson around 7:30 to let him know I might be running late, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left a cheerful message assuring him I was on my way and would make it on time. Just outside of Hartford, a truck swerved into my lane, forcing me onto the shoulder. My heart raced as I regained control of the car, checking quickly to make sure the cake and gift were still intact. They were safe, but my nerves were frayed. I stopped at a rest area, splashed water on my face, and called Jackson again. Once more I reached his voicemail. "Jackson, honey, just checking in. About 3 hours out now. Can't wait to see you and Amanda tonight. Love you." Traffic grew heavier as I approached Boston, and navigating the unfamiliar city streets with my outdated GPS was challenging. I drove past Jackson's apartment building twice before realizing it. Finding parking took another 20 minutes, and by the time I finally pulled into a spot 6 blocks away, it was already 6:15, 15 minutes past, when Jackson had told me to arrive. I carefully gathered the cake container and gift locked the car and hurried through the light rain that was still falling. My new shoes pinched my feet as I walked, but I barely noticed. I was focused on not being any later on making a good impression on Amanda's family. Jackson's apartment building was one of those renovated industrial spaces, all exposed brick and massive windows. The security guard in the lobby eyed me suspiciously as I approached, balancing my bundles. "I'm here to see Jackson Williams in apartment 507. I said, trying to smooth my rain-frizzed hair with one hand. "Your name?" he asked, checking his tablet. "Cynthia Williams. I'm his mother." He frowned slightly. "You're not on the visitor list for today." "There must be some mistake," I insisted. "It's his engagement dinner. I drove 8 hours to be here." After a phone call upstairs that went unanswered, he finally shrugged and let me through, perhaps taking pity on the soaked middle-aged woman clutching a homemade cake. The elevator was out of order, so I climbed 5 flights of stairs, careful not to jostle the cake. By the time I reached Jackson's door, I was out of breath. My hair was a disaster, and my new dress had a small rain stain on the hem. Still, I was smiling as I knocked on the door, so excited to celebrate this milestone with my son. I heard laughter inside and the clink of glasses. The door swung open, and there stood Jackson looking handsome, in a tailored shirt, a glass of wine in his hand. His smile faltered when he saw me. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Over his shoulder, I could see into the apartment. Amanda was sitting on the couch next to an older couple who had to be her parents, dressed impeccably. There was another couple I didn't recognize, perhaps in their 30s. Everyone looked surprised to see me. "I'm here for the engagement dinner," I said, my voice suddenly small. "You said it was tonight at 6. That's when he said those words that felt like a physical blow. "Oh, we had it yesterday. Just close family." Just close family. The words echoed in my mind as I took in the scene behind him. On the coffee table were professional photographs from what was clearly the real engagement celebration, elegant black and white shots of Jackson and Amanda, surrounded by her family and friends. I spotted one of those instant cameras, and a stack of photos suggesting they were having some kind of casual follow-up gathering right now. Amanda's mother whispered something to her husband. Amanda herself didn't even look up from her phone. No one invited me in. No one expressed regret for the misunderstanding. In that moment, I realized with perfect clarity that there had been no misunderstanding at all. I simply wasn't wanted at their real celebration. I don't know how I maintained my composure in that moment. Something deep inside me, perhaps pride, perhaps shock, kept me from breaking down on Jackson's doorstep. Instead, I did something that surprised even myself. I smiled. "I see," I said quietly. "I'm sorry for the confusion." Jackson started to say something about having told me it was a small family thing, implying that I had somehow misunderstood, but I wasn't really listening anymore. I was already backing away from the door. "I'll leave you to your evening," I said, still with that strange, calm smile on my face. "Congratulations again." I left the wrapped crystal flutes leaning against the wall by his door. The cake I took with me, though, I'm not sure why. Perhaps some small part of me wasn't ready to leave behind something I had made with such care and love, only to have it become an awkward obligation for people who clearly didn't want me there. The walk back to my car was a blur. The rain had picked up again, but I barely noticed it soaking through my clothes. I remember an elderly woman under an umbrella asking if I was all right as I passed her, and I remember nodding mechanically, still clutching my cake container. When I reached my car, I sat behind the wheel for a long time without starting the engine. The reality of what had just happened was beginning to sink in, but I still felt oddly numb. I couldn't face the long drive home in my emotional state, so I navigated to the budget motel I had booked for the night, planning to stay there as originally intended. The motel was just off the highway, a single-story building with doors that opened directly to the parking lot. The young woman at the front desk looked concerned when I walked in, dripping wet and probably looking shell-shocked. "Ma'am, are you okay?" she asked as she processed my reservation. "Just got caught in the rain," I said automatically. "Long drive today." "Well, we've got a hot shower and clean sheets waiting for you," she said kindly. "Room 114 just down the hall to the right." Once inside the small clean room, the emotional numbness began to wear off. I placed the cake container on the dresser, hung my wet dress in the bathroom to dry, and sat on the edge of the bed. That's when the first tears came, silent at first, then building into deep, racking sobs that I muffled with a pillow. I cried for what felt like hours, releasing years of built-up hurt and disappointment. I cried for the little boy who used to run into my arms when I picked him up from school, and for the young man who now couldn't even be bothered to include me in one of the most important celebrations of his life. I cried for all the sacrifices that seemed to have meant nothing for the distance that had grown between us, that I had tried so hard to deny. Sometime during that endless night, my phone buzzed with a text from Jackson. "Sorry about the mix-up. We kept it small because Amanda's parents wanted to host at their club. Maybe we can do lunch tomorrow before you drive back." There was no acknowledgement of my long drive, no real apology for excluding me, just a half-hearted offer that felt more like an obligation than a desire to see me. I didn't respond. A second text came an hour later. "Mom, you okay?" And then a third, "Guessing you're driving back already. Text when you get home safe." I turned my phone off, unable to bear any more of his hollow concern. Instead, I took out my wallet and removed the small, worn photo I always carried with me, Jackson, at his high school graduation, beaming with pride as I stood beside him in my best dress. We had taken the photo right after I had given him his graduation present, a watch that had belonged to his father. "Dad would be so proud of you," I had told him, and he had hugged me tight, both of us crying. Where had that boy gone? When had my son become someone who could so casually break his mother's heart? I must have fallen asleep eventually, still clutching that photo. I woke early the next morning, my eyes swollen from crying, and mechanically prepared to leave. The cake sat untouched on the dresser. On impulse, I left it there with a note for the housekeeping staff. "Please enjoy. Made with love for a celebration that never happened." As I checked out, the same young woman was at the front desk. She glanced at my puffy eyes but didn't comment. "Drive safe now," she said as she handed me my receipt. "Thank you," I replied, and then added, "There's a cake in the room. It's perfectly good. I thought the staff might enjoy it." "That's very kind," she said. Then after a pause, "Whatever happened, I hope things get better." Her simple kindness nearly broke me again. I nodded quickly and hurried out to my car before the tears could return. During the long drive home, my phone rang several times. It was Susan, my closest friend since college days. We had seen each other through everything, her divorce, my widowhood, raising our children. I finally answered on her fourth attempt. "Cynthia, what happened? You were supposed to call me after the dinner," she said, concern evident in her voice. I told her everything, my voice breaking several times during the story. "Oh, Cyn," she said when I had finished. "I'm so sorry. That's just cruel." "The worst part is I keep wondering what I did wrong," I admitted. "Where did I fail him that he could treat me this way?" "You didn't fail him," Susan said firmly. "You gave that boy everything. This isn't about you, it's about him and the values he's chosen. And maybe about that fiancée of his and her family." Susan's unwavering support carried me through the rest of the drive home. We talked about my options, from confronting Jackson to giving him space to simply going on with my life. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had no clear plan, just a deep exhaustion and a growing sense that something fundamental had changed in my relationship with my son. Walking into my empty house felt strange after the emotional whirlwind of the past 24 hours. Everything was exactly as I had left it, but I felt fundamentally different, as if I had aged years in a single day. I placed my overnight bag on the floor and checked my answering machine out of habit, though few people called my landline anymore. There was one message from my neighbor, Martha. "Cynthia, it's Martha. Just checking to make sure you're okay. Noticed your car was gone yesterday and today. Call when you get back." Martha had been my neighbor for over 20 years, a kindly widow a few years older than me. We looked out for each other in the small ways that longtime neighbors do, collecting each other's mail during vacations, sharing garden vegetables in summer. I would have to tell her some version of what had happened, but I couldn't face that conversation yet. Instead, I unpacked my bag and put my barely worn new dress in the closet, wondering if I would ever have occasion to wear it. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, feeling oddly disconnected from my surroundings. My landline rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Martha. "Cynthia, I saw your car in the driveway. How was the engagement dinner? Tell me all about it." I hesitated, then decided on a simplified version of the truth. "There was a misunderstanding about the date. I missed it." "Oh no. After that long drive, what happened?" "It's complicated, Martha. I'm pretty tired right now." She must have heard something in my voice because her tone immediately softened. "Of course, dear. Why don't you come over for coffee tomorrow? I made banana bread." After hanging up, I found myself drawn to my home office, where I kept my financial records. Some part of me needed to understand exactly what my relationship with Jackson had become. I pulled out my bank statements from the past year and my credit card records. What I found was sobering. I had been paying approximately $1,200 each month toward Jackson's premium credit card, the one he had insisted he needed for work networking. Looking at the statements, I could see charges for upscale restaurants, designer clothes, weekend trips to New York and Washington, D.C. There were jewelry store purchases that had to be gifts for Amanda, and regular charges at high-end grocery stores and wine shops. None of these were necessities, and all were well within what Jackson should have been able to afford on his own salary. Yet somehow, I had fallen into the pattern of covering these expenses, starting from his college days, when he truly needed help continuing even as he built his career. More disturbing were my retirement accounts, which were significantly smaller than they should have been. I had made early withdrawals several times to help Jackson with security deposits on apartments, to help him buy his first professional wardrobe, to cover an unexpected car repair. Each time I had told myself it was just temporary, that he would pay me back eventually, or that my teacher's pension would be enough. Looking at the complete financial picture, I realized I had been enabling Jackson's lifestyle at the expense of my own security. And what had it gotten me? Exclusion from one of the most important events in his life, treated as an afterthought rather than as the mother who had sacrificed everything for him. The next morning I had coffee with Martha as promised. She listened sympathetically as I shared a slightly more detailed version of what had happened. "I never wanted to say anything," she said carefully, "but I've worried about how much you do for Jackson. My Henry always said children need to stand on their own 2 feet eventually." Later that day, I visited the cemetery where Michael was buried. I hadn't been in several months, though I tried to go regularly with fresh flowers. I sat on the small bench near his grave and talked to him as I often did during difficult times. "I don't know what to do, Michael," I said quietly. "I feel like I've lost him somehow, but I don't know when or how it happened. You'd be so disappointed in how he's turned out." There was no answer, of course, just the gentle rustling of leaves and distant bird calls. But sitting there in the peaceful cemetery, I felt a sense of clarity beginning to form. Michael had been a man of principle and integrity. He would have expected the same from his son, and he would have been heartbroken to see how Jackson was treating me. The next day I called Thomas, a friend who worked as a financial advisor. We had taught at the same high school until his career changed 10 years earlier. He agreed to meet me for lunch, and I brought my financial records with me. "This isn't sustainable, Cynthia," he said bluntly after reviewing my situation. "You're jeopardizing your retirement to subsidize your adult son's luxury lifestyle." "I know that now," I admitted. "I just don't know how to stop it without causing a major rift." "The rift is already there," Thomas pointed out gently. "He's showing you who he is and what he values. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" That evening, I made a decision that was both terrifying and liberating. I logged into my online banking account and canceled the automatic payment to Jackson's credit card. Then I transferred a small amount from my checking account into a new savings account I labeled Future Travels, something I had always dreamed of doing but had repeatedly postponed to help Jackson. I half expected to hear from Jackson immediately, but 3 days passed in silence. I spent that time reconnecting with myself and my community. I signed up for a pottery class at the local community center, something I had wanted to try for years. I joined Susan for a long hike in the state park, feeling the tension leave my body as we walked and talked. I even called another retired teacher friend about possibly doing some part-time tutoring to supplement my income and keep my mind active. On the third day, my phone rang with Jackson's number. I took a deep breath before answering. "Mom." His voice was panicked. "There's something wrong with the credit card. It won't go through. Did you forget to make the payment?" "No, Jackson, I didn't forget." My voice was calmer than I expected, steady and clear. "I've decided to stop making those payments." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "You what?" His voice had risen an octave. "But I'm in the middle of dinner with Amanda and her parents." The card was declined. "Do you know how embarrassing that was?" "I imagine it was very embarrassing," I acknowledged. "But you're 30 years old, Jackson. You have a good job. There's no reason you can't pay your own credit card bills." "Is this because of the dinner thing? Are you punishing me?" His tone had turned accusatory. "That's really petty, Mom." I felt a flash of anger, but kept my voice level. This isn't about punishment. This is about me finally recognizing that I've been enabling behavior that isn't healthy for either of us. What are you talking about? After everything we've been through, you're just cutting me off. In the background, I could hear Amanda's voice, though I couldn't make out her words. Her tone sounded irritated. Jackson, I've supported you in every way I could your entire life. I worked 2 jobs so you could have everything you needed. I sold family heirlooms to pay for your education. I've continued paying your bills, even though you earn more than enough to cover them yourself. That's what parents do, he shot back. They support their kids. Yes, they do. I agreed. But at some point, that support needs to shift from financial to emotional. I'll always be here for you as your mother, but I can't continue financing your lifestyle at the expense of my own security. There was a rustling sound, and then suddenly a new voice came on the line. Amanda. Cynthia, this is really inappropriate timing, she said coldly. We're in the middle of dinner with my parents. Surely whatever issue you're having with Jackson could wait until tomorrow. I took another deep breath. Amanda, I understand this is awkward timing, but I'm simply answering a call Jackson made to me. If he'd like to continue this conversation later, that's fine. Well, the damage is already done, she snapped. The check is sitting there unpaid and it's humiliating. I'm sorry for the embarrassment, I said sincerely. But as I just explained to Jackson, I won't be paying that credit card anymore. He'll need to handle it himself. This is about the engagement dinner, isn't it? She pressed. Jackson explained that there was a misunderstanding. You're overreacting. This isn't about the engagement dinner, Amanda, I replied, though part of me knew that event had been the final catalyst. This is about establishing healthy boundaries that should have been in place long ago. I heard Jackson's voice in the background, and the phone rustled again as he reclaimed it. Mom, you can't do this, he said, his voice now a mixture of anger and panic. I have the wedding to pay for and the honeymoon, and we're looking at houses in Cambridge. Those are all wonderful milestones, Jackson, and I'm happy for you. But they're your milestones to fund, not mine. We were counting on your help. The naked entitlement in his voice broke my heart all over again. I never promised to pay for your wedding or your house, Jackson. But you've always helped before. You can't just stop now when I need it most. I closed my eyes, feeling both sad and strangely peaceful. I'm sorry you feel blindsided by this, but my decision is made. I suggest you talk to the restaurant about making alternative payment arrangements, and then we can discuss this further when everyone is calmer. This is unbelievable, he muttered. Wait till I tell Dad's sister how you're treating me. Aunt Lisbeth always said you were too controlling. The mention of my late husband's sister, who had never approved of me and whom Jackson hardly ever saw, felt like a deliberate attempt to hurt me. It nearly worked. But instead of reacting emotionally, I simply said, You're welcome to discuss this with whomever you choose. My decision stands. I ended the call before he could respond, my hands shaking slightly as I set down the phone. I expected to feel guilty or anxious, but instead, I felt a surprising sense of relief. For the first time in decades, I had put my own needs first. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with text messages from Jackson alternating between guilt trips, anger, and attempts at negotiation. I read them all but didn't respond. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a necessary change that was long overdue. The next morning, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Gerald Harrington, Amanda's father. Mrs. Williams, he began formally. I wanted to speak with you directly about this unfortunate situation with Jackson's finances. Mr. Harrington, I appreciate your concern, but this is really between me and my son. Well, it affects my daughter now too, he replied. And frankly, we were under the impression that you would be contributing significantly to their wedding and helping with the down payment on their first home. I was momentarily speechless. I never made any such promises. Perhaps not explicitly, he conceded, but given your history of financial support, it was a reasonable expectation. Amanda and Jackson have already put deposits down on a venue based on this understanding. I'm sorry if there was a miscommunication, I said firmly. But I won't be pressured into financial commitments I never made and cannot afford. Cannot afford? His tone was skeptical. Jackson mentioned you have substantial savings. The realization that Jackson had been discussing my finances with his future in-laws, likely exaggerating my modest savings, was another painful blow. But it also strengthened my resolve. My financial situation is private, Mr. Harrington, and with all due respect, so are the arrangements between me and my son. I see, he said coldly. Well, I had hoped to resolve this amicably. Jackson is quite distraught. I'm always willing to talk with Jackson, I assured him. But the outcome regarding the credit card payments won't change. After that conversation, I felt even more certain I had made the right decision. The pressure from Amanda's family only confirmed what I had begun to suspect, that my perceived financial support was a significant factor in how Jackson and his new family viewed my role in their lives. Despite the emotional strain, I held firm. When Jackson called again that evening, his approach had shifted from anger to manipulation. "Mom, please," he said, his voice deliberately vulnerable. "I know I've been distant lately and I'm sorry about the dinner mix-up, but I really need your help right now, just until after the wedding. Then I promise I'll take care of everything myself." "I've heard that promise before, Jackson," I said gently. "But this time I need to see actions rather than words." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I love you, and I'll always be here for you emotionally. But financially, you're on your own now." His voice hardened again. "Fine. I guess I'll have to tell Amanda we need to cancel the wedding venue. We'll probably lose our deposit." "That's a choice you'll have to make," I said, refusing to take the bait. "There are many lovely and affordable wedding options." "Affordable," he scoffed. "Like what? The community center where you play bingo?" That cutting remark told me everything about how he viewed my life and my world, and it strengthened my resolve even further. "Jackson, when you're ready to have a respectful conversation about rebuilding our relationship, I'm here. Until then, I think we both need some space." I ended the call, feeling both heartbroken and strangely empowered. For perhaps the first time since becoming a mother, I was setting boundaries that protected my own well-being, even though it hurt. The weeks following my decision were challenging, but transformative. Jackson's communication alternated between angry outbursts, silent treatment, and occasional attempts at reconciliation that always circled back to financial requests. I remained consistent in my boundary, which seemed to confuse him more than anything else. He had never known me to stand my ground this way before. Meanwhile, I threw myself into building a richer, more fulfilling life. The pottery class I had signed up for became a highlight of my week. I discovered I had a natural aptitude for the wheel, and the tactile experience of shaping clay was deeply therapeutic. My instructor, Gloria, encouraged me to consider selling some of my pieces at the local artisan market. "You've got a real eye for form and color," she told me as I glazed a bowl in shades of blue and green. "People would pay good money for these." The idea of earning money from my creativity was appealing, especially as I adjusted to my new financial reality. Without Jackson's expenses draining my accounts, I was actually doing better than expected, but additional income would provide more security and freedom. I also reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with while focusing so much on Jackson. One Saturday, I met for lunch with Diane, a former colleague who had moved to a neighboring town 5 years earlier. Our conversation flowed easily as we caught up on each other's lives. "I've been meaning to call you for ages," Diane admitted. "But you were always so busy with Jackson that I didn't want to impose." Her comment made me realize how much of my identity had been wrapped up in being Jackson's mother, often at the expense of other relationships and my own interests. That was changing now, and though the catalyst had been painful, the outcome was increasingly positive. About a month after the credit card incident, I received an unexpected call from Amanda's mother, Eleanor Harrington. "Cynthia," she began without preamble, "I think we got off on the wrong foot. Would you be willing to meet me for coffee?" Surprised but curious, I agreed. We met at a cafe halfway between our towns. Eleanor was as polished and intimidating as I remembered from that brief glimpse in Jackson's apartment, but there was something different about her manner today, a hint of warmth I hadn't seen before. "I want to apologize for how things have unfolded," she said after we had ordered. "The engagement dinner situation was unfortunate." "Yes, it was," I agreed simply. She sighed. "Amanda has always been headstrong. When she insisted on keeping the dinner intimate, I should have pushed back harder. Family is family, after all." I was surprised by her candor. "I appreciate that. Gerald told me about his call to you," she continued. "He shouldn't have gotten involved that way, but you should know your standing your ground has caused quite a stir." "I didn't do it to cause a stir," I clarified. "I did it because it was necessary." She nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that now, and I think it might have been the wake-up call Amanda and Jackson needed." "What do you mean?" "They've had to scale back their wedding plans significantly," Eleanor explained. "Gerald and I are contributing, of course, but we've made it clear they need to stay within a reasonable budget. And Amanda's actually rising to the challenge. She's comparing venues looking at sample sales for her dress. I've never seen her so practical." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I simply nodded. "Jackson, too," Eleanor continued. "Gerald tells me he's been much more focused at work lately, even took on some additional clients. Apparently he's determined to prove himself." The conversation gave me a new perspective on the situation. My decision had affected not just Jackson, but also Amanda and her family. And while it hadn't been my intention to force them to reevaluate their approach to finances and planning, it seemed to be having that effect. As we parted, Eleanor surprised me by saying, "You know, I think I misjudged you, Cynthia. It takes strength to do what you did." Meanwhile, my own life continued to expand in new directions. I joined a community garden project tending a small plot of vegetables and herbs that connected me to the earth in a way I found deeply satisfying. I started tutoring 3 afternoons a week at the Literacy Center, working with adults who were learning to read or improving their skills. The gratitude in their eyes when they mastered a new word or concept reminded me of why I had loved teaching. Most surprisingly, I reconnected with James, a history teacher who had worked at my school until his retirement 2 years before mine. We had always been friendly colleagues, but now meeting occasionally for coffee to discuss books or local events, I found myself enjoying his company in a new way. He was thoughtful and kind, with a dry wit that made me laugh more than I had in years. I wasn't ready to call it dating, but it was nice to have a companion who valued my thoughts and experiences. 6 weeks after our confrontation, Jackson showed up at my door unannounced. He looked tired, but determined. "Can we talk?" he asked, standing on the porch where he had played as a child. I invited him in, feeling both cautious and hopeful. We sat at the kitchen table, mugs of coffee between us like a buffer. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began. "About everything. About how I've been living my life, about how I've treated you." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I was angry at first," he admitted. "I felt like you were abandoning me when I needed you most. But then I had to figure out how to handle things on my own, and I realized something important." "What's that?" "I'm actually capable of managing my own life," he said with a small, self-deprecating smile. "Who knew, right?" I couldn't help but smile back. "I always knew you were capable, Jackson. You just needed to discover it for yourself." Our conversation that day wasn't a magical fix for all the issues between us. There were still moments of tension, especially when he mentioned the scaled-down wedding plans with a hint of resentment. But it was a beginning, a first step toward a more honest and balanced relationship. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. "I'm sorry about the engagement dinner, Mom. It was wrong to exclude you." "Yes, it was," I agreed softly. "But we can move forward now if we both choose to." He nodded, and for a brief moment, I saw a glimpse of the thoughtful boy he had once been before status and appearances became so important to him. The journey of redefining our relationship was just beginning, but for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely hopeful about its direction. The next several months brought significant changes for both Jackson and me. True to Eleanor's word, Jackson and Amanda scaled back their wedding plans considerably. The exclusive venue with its six-figure price tag was replaced by a charming historic inn with beautiful gardens. The guest list, once approaching 300, was cut to a more intimate group of 100 close friends and family. I received a proper invitation to the new wedding, hand-delivered by Jackson during one of his increasingly regular visits. These visits were different from before, more genuine, and less focused on what I could do for him. Sometimes we simply had coffee and talked about our lives. Other times he would help me with small projects around the house, like fixing the leaky faucet in the bathroom or repainting the porch railings, tasks I had been putting off. During one such visit, as we worked together planting spring bulbs in my front yard, Jackson brought up his finances unprompted. "I've been meeting with a financial advisor at work," he told me, pressing soil around a daffodil bulb. "Setting up a proper budget, starting a savings plan, looking at my retirement options." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely proud. "I had no idea how much I was spending before," he admitted, "or how unrealistic my expectations were. When Amanda and I started looking at houses, I just assumed we could afford something like her parents have. It never occurred to me that they spent 30 years building up to that." His newfound perspective was refreshing, though I wondered how Amanda was adapting to these changes. I got my answer when Jackson invited me to dinner at their apartment the following weekend. Amanda greeted me with unexpected warmth, showing me around their space with none of the condescension I had sensed before. "We've been redecorating on a budget," she explained, pointing out a second-hand coffee table she had refinished herself and curtains she had sewn from fabric found at a discount store. "It's actually been kind of fun discovering what we can create ourselves instead of just buying everything new." Over dinner, a homemade lasagna, rather than expensive takeout, Amanda spoke openly about her own journey. "I was pretty spoiled growing up," she acknowledged. "Dad never talked about money except to say we had plenty of it. I never learned to budget or prioritize." "It's been an adjustment for both of us," Jackson added, "but I think we're stronger for it." As we enjoyed coffee and a simple dessert, Amanda mentioned that her mother had asked if I would consider joining them for a wedding planning lunch the following weekend. "She really enjoyed your conversation," Amanda explained. "Said you had a refreshing perspective." This developing relationship with Eleanor was unexpected but welcome. We were very different women from different backgrounds, but I found we shared a pragmatic approach to life and a dry sense of humor that made our interactions enjoyable. At home, my own life continued to flourish. My pottery hobby had evolved into a small side business with several of my pieces selling at the local artisan market each month. The extra income allowed me to start a dedicated travel fund, something I had always dreamed of but never prioritized. James and I had progressed from occasional coffee meetings to regular dinner dates. He was patient and understanding, never pushing me to define our relationship before I was ready. When he invited me to join him on a weekend trip to a coastal town known for its art galleries and seafood restaurants, I surprised myself by saying yes without hesitation. "You seem different lately," Susan commented during one of our weekly walks. "More confident, more at peace." "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I'm finally living my own life instead of just supporting someone else's." "It suits you," she said with a smile. "And how are things with Jackson?" "Better than I expected, actually. We're finding our way to a new kind of relationship, one with more balance." 2 months before the wedding, Jackson invited me to lunch, just the two of us. He seemed nervous, playing with his napkin and avoiding eye contact until our food arrived. "Mom, there's something I wanted to ask you," he finally said. "About the wedding." I braced myself, wondering if, despite his progress, he was going to ask for financial help after all. "Would you consider making a speech at the reception?" he asked instead. "It would mean a lot to me." The request touched me deeply. It was an acknowledgement of my place in his life, a public inclusion that contrasted sharply with the exclusion I had felt at the engagement dinner. "I'd be honored," I told him, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. He smiled, looking relieved. "There's one more thing. Amanda and I have been talking, and we'd like to know if you still have Grandma's pearl necklace." My mother's pearls had been her most treasured possession, given to me on my wedding day and intended to be passed down through generations. I do, I confirmed. It's in my safe deposit box. Amanda would like to wear it for the wedding if that's okay with you, as her something borrowed. The gesture was another surprise, another sign of the shifting dynamics between us. The Amanda I had first met would never have considered wearing something from my family, something without a designer label and a hefty price tag. I think that would be lovely, I said, blinking back unexpected tears. The week before the wedding, I attended the rehearsal dinner hosted by Amanda's parents at a nice but not extravagant restaurant. I was seated at the family table between Eleanor and Amanda's grandmother, treated as an honored guest rather than an obligation. During a quiet moment, Eleanor leaned over to speak privately. I want you to know what you did took courage. Standing your ground like that. It changed things for the better. I didn't do it to teach anyone a lesson, I clarified. I did it because I needed to. Sometimes those are the most powerful actions, she replied. The ones we take for ourselves that end up benefiting everyone. The wedding itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Amanda wore a lovely gown she had found at a sample sale and altered herself with my mother's pearls gracing her neck. Jackson looked handsome and happy, but what struck me most was how present he seemed, fully engaged in the moment, rather than concerned with impressing anyone. During the reception, I delivered my speech sharing stories of Jackson's childhood and offering wisdom about partnership and growth. I spoke about the strength that comes from facing challenges together and the importance of building a marriage on mutual respect and support rather than external validation. As I raised my glass for the toast, I caught Jackson's eye across the room. He mouthed, "Thank you." And I knew he wasn't just thanking me for the speech, but for the difficult love that had helped him find his way to this more authentic life. After the cake was cut and the dancing began, Jackson pulled me onto the dance floor for a mother-son dance we hadn't planned. I'm proud of you, I told him as we swayed to the music. Not because of your job or your address or anything external. I'm proud of the man you're becoming on the inside. I'm trying, he said simply. And I'm sorry it took me so long to appreciate everything you've done for me. We both needed to learn and grow, I replied. That's what life is about. As the night wound down, Amanda approached me with a warm hug. Thank you for the pearls, she said, and for raising the man I love, even when he was being an idiot. I laughed at her candor. We all have our moments. We'd love for you to visit us in the new apartment after the honeymoon, she added. It's smaller than we originally planned, but it's in a nice neighborhood with a little park nearby. I was touched by the genuine invitation. I'd like that very much. As I drove home from the wedding, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. What had begun with one of the most painful experiences of my life had led to unexpected growth and healing for all of us. By finally having the courage to prioritize my own well-being, I had inadvertently given my son the push he needed to become more independent and authentic. Back home, I found a message from James on my answering machine asking how the wedding had gone and whether I was still interested in that coastal trip the following weekend. I smiled as I listened, grateful for this new chapter in my life, one filled with possibilities I was finally free to explore. That coastal trip with James became the first of many adventures in my newly expanded life. We spent 2 glorious days exploring art galleries, walking on beaches, and enjoying seafood at small local restaurants. James was attentive and thoughtful, never making me feel rushed or pressured. When he reached for my hand during a sunset walk, it felt natural and right. I've been waiting to do that for about 20 years, he admitted with a shy smile. 20 years? I asked, surprised. Since that faculty meeting when you stood up to Principal Edwards about the budget cuts to the arts program. You were so passionate, so principled. I was smitten right then and there. But you were married then, I pointed out. Yes, and I loved my wife, he acknowledged. But after she passed, when I thought about dating again, you were always in the back of my mind. By then, though, you seemed so wrapped up in Jackson's life, I didn't think you'd be interested. His confession was touching and made me realize how much of my life I had put on hold while centering everything around my son. No more. Now I was embracing all the possibilities that had waited patiently for me to notice them. Back home, my pottery continued to gain local recognition. The owner of a boutique in a nearby tourist town asked to carry my pieces on consignment, expanding my reach beyond the weekend artisan market. I developed a signature style of functional pieces with organic flowing glazes that reminded people of the ocean. My work at the literacy center became increasingly rewarding. One of my students, a grandmother in her 60s who had never learned to read, cried with joy when she finished her first complete book. "I can finally read bedtime stories to my grandchildren," she told me, clutching the simple children's book like a treasure. As promised, I visited Jackson and Amanda in their new apartment after their honeymoon. It was indeed smaller than they might have initially planned, located in a diverse neighborhood rather than the exclusive area where Amanda had grown up. But they had made it truly their own, with a mix of budget-friendly new items and creatively upcycled finds. "We're learning to be more intentional about what we bring into our home," Amanda explained as she showed me around, "asking if we really love something or if we're just buying it because we think we should." Jackson. I noticed seemed more relaxed in this modest space than he had in his previous apartment with its expensive furniture and status symbol address. "Work's going really well," he told me over dinner. "I got a promotion last month, not because I'm networking at the right restaurants, but because I'm actually focusing on the clients and their needs." The funny thing is, Amanda added, his boss specifically mentioned Jackson's improved financial planning skills as a reason for the promotion, said it showed maturity and gave clients confidence. I smiled at the irony. Sometimes the lessons we resist the most are exactly what we need. Our relationship continued to heal and evolve over the following months. Jackson no longer called only when he needed something. Instead, he checked in regularly just to talk. Sometimes he asked for advice, not financial but personal or professional. And most tellingly, he listened to my answers with genuine interest rather than impatience. One Sunday afternoon, 6 months after the wedding, Jackson came by alone while Amanda was visiting her parents. "I wanted to give you something," he said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a check for a substantial amount, along with a note that simply said, "First installment, Love, Jay." "What is this?" I asked, confused. "I'm paying you back," he explained, "for the credit card for all the extras over the years. It won't be all at once, but I've worked it into our budget, a little each month until it's done." I was speechless. It wasn't about the money itself, but about the recognition of all I had given the acknowledgement of its value. "You don't have to do this," I finally said. "I know," he replied. "That's why I want to. It's important to me." That check became the first of many monthly installments. I put most of the money into my travel fund, using some to take a pottery workshop in Arizona that I had been eyeing. The experience expanded my skills and introduced me to a network of artisans who shared techniques and business advice. As my one-year independence anniversary approached, I decided to host a small gathering at my home. I invited Susan and her husband James, my pottery instructor Gloria, some colleagues from the Literacy Center, and of course Jackson and Amanda. It wasn't a formal celebration, with a stated purpose, just a dinner party with people who had become important parts of my life. During the evening, as conversations flowed around my dining table, I looked at the diverse group of friends and family gathered there and felt a profound sense of gratitude. My life had blossomed in ways I couldn't have imagined when I made that painful drive home from Boston a year earlier. James squeezed my hand under the table, a gesture that had become familiar and comforting. Jackson caught the movement and smiled, genuinely happy to see me finding companionship. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, Jackson asked if he could make a toast. "To my mom," he said, raising his glass, "who taught me the hardest and most important lesson of my life, not through lectures or advice but through example. She showed me that true strength isn't about never falling down, it's about how you get back up. And sometimes it's about walking away from what hurts you, even when that's the hardest thing to do." There were tears in his eyes as he continued. "A year ago, I was focused on all the wrong things. Status, appearances, what other people thought. I didn't recognize the amazing woman who had given me everything because I was too busy looking past her to what she could do for me next. But when she finally said, "Enough," it forced me to really see her maybe for the first time since I was a kid. Amanda stood beside him, nodding in agreement. "Cynthia taught us both what real integrity looks like," she added, "and I'm grateful every day for that lesson, even though it wasn't easy to learn." Their words touched me deeply. The pain of that engagement dinner rejection had been transformed into something powerful and healing, not just for me, but for all of us. Later that evening, after the other guests had gone home, Jackson lingered to help clean up. As we washed dishes side by side, he asked a question that caught me by surprise. "Do you think Dad would be proud of me now?" I considered my answer carefully. "I think he would be very proud of the man you've become this past year. Your father valued honesty, responsibility, and treating people with respect. Those are all qualities you're embracing now." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if he had lived, if I would have turned out differently." "We can't know that," I said gently. "But I do know he would have loved you fiercely just as I do. And he would have been just as proud as I am to see you finding your way to a more authentic life." As Jackson prepared to leave, he hugged me tightly. "I love you, Mom. Not for what you can do for me, but for who you are." Those words were the greatest gift he could have given me, the recognition I had longed for, without even realizing it. After he left, I sat on my porch swing in the cool evening air, reflecting on the journey of the past year. I had driven 8 hours to an engagement dinner, only to be told I wasn't wanted there. That painful rejection had catalyzed a profound transformation, forcing me to recognize how I had enabled my son's entitlement and neglected my own needs in the process. The decision to stop paying that credit card bill had seemed small in the moment, but it had rippled outward, changing not just my financial situation, but the fundamental dynamics of my relationships and my sense of self-worth. By finally saying enough to being taken for granted, I had opened the door to a richer, more balanced life for everyone involved. As I looked up at the stars, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary and ultimately healing. I had rediscovered my own strength, rebuilt my relationship with my son on healthier terms, and opened myself to new possibilities for connection and fulfillment. Sometimes the most painful moments in our lives become catalysts for our most important growth. My 8-hour drive to a dinner that had already happened had ultimately led me home to myself, and that was a journey worth every difficult mile. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love? How did it change your relationship? I believe these challenging moments often lead to our greatest growth. Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation. Remember that valuing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to stand in your own truth even when it's difficult.